The nights of January 8 to 9, 2026, will forever be etched as one of the darkest chapters in the 47-year history of the Islamic Republic of Iran. Streets in Tehran, Rasht, Kermanshah, and Isfahan, once vibrant centers of daily life, suddenly turned into killing fields. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, and its basic paramilitary forces deployed military-grade weapons against unarmed crowds. Rooftop snipers, vehicle-mounted machine guns, and close-range shotgun pellets aimed at heads, necks, chests, and especially eyes. Eyewitness videos that somehow escaped the blackout showed blood-soaked pavements, screams echoing through smoke-filled alleys, and bodies strewn across intersections in scenes reminiscent of urban warfare. At approximately 20:30 Iran Standard Time on January 8, the regime activated a nationwide kill switch, severing mobile data, broadband, and most SMS services for Iran's 92 million people. This deliberate digital blackout isolated the population, prevented coordination of protests, and blocked graphic footage from reaching the outside world, ensuring atrocities could unfold in near-total darkness. A clandestine report leaked by a network of Iranian doctors to the Sunday Times on January 18, 2026, exposed the horrifying scale. Compiled via smuggled Starlink terminals amid the blackout, the document estimated at least 16,500 protesters killed, with figures potentially reaching 18,000. Injuries ranged from 330,000 to 360,000, many involving severe military wounds and permanent disabilities. In Tehran alone, Noor Clinic recorded around 7,000 pellet-related ocular traumas over those 2 nights, with staff performing over 800 emergency enucleations, eye removals, in a single night to prevent fatal infections. These numbers represent not mere statistics, but a stolen generation, mostly young people under 30, including students, workers, and even teenagers caught in indiscriminate fire. For context, the 2019 fuel protests claimed roughly 1,500 lives, and the 2022 woman life freedom movement following Mahsa Amini's death resulted in over 500 fatalities, tragedies that shocked the world but pale in comparison to the 2026 massacre. This was no longer crowd control, it was systematic annihilation designed to eradicate the roots of revolution. Exiled Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi's direct video call on January 8 for unified, synchronized mass action at 8 p.m. urging chants against the regime and a return to freedom, ignited the largest crowd since 2009, with millions responding nationwide by January 9. Chants of "Death to the Dictator" and "Pahlavi will return" filled the air, transforming economic despair into an existential demand for regime change. Yet the regime's response was swift and savage, turning hope into horror. In an information war fueled by the 13-day-plus blackout, the truth is only now emerging: Iran has descended into a nightmare. And the international community can no longer afford silence. The protests in Iran erupted on December 28, 2025, not as a sudden political uprising, but as a classic bread-and-butter revolt rooted in unbearable economic pain. It began in Tehran's historic Grand Bazaar, the centuries-old commercial heart of the capital, where shopkeepers and merchants, traditionally a conservative pillar of Iranian society and even supporters of the 1979 Islamic Revolution, shuttered their stalls in fury. Hyperinflation had driven food and fuel prices sky-high, the rial had collapsed to record lows, reaching around 1.39 to 1.42 million to the US dollar by early January, and widespread shortages, unemployment, and currency volatility made daily survival impossible for millions. Initial chants were simple and visceral: "Death to high prices, we can't afford to live," and demands for relief from the crushing cost of living exacerbated by years of sanctions, mismanagement, and the fallout from the 2025 Iran-Israel conflict that damaged infrastructure and deepened isolation. Videos and eyewitness accounts captured the early scenes. Electronics and mobile phone traders in central Tehran closed first on December 28. followed by broader Bazaar shutdowns. By December 29 to 30, protests spilled into streets near the Grand Bazaar, with crowds marching toward Khomeini Square, chanting against economic despair while security forces responded with tear gas. The movement spread like wildfire to major cities, Isfahan, Shiraz, Tabriz, Mashhad, and smaller towns, encompassing 17 of Iran's 31 provinces by New Year's Eve. University students joined quickly, turning localized anger into nationwide solidarity. What started as economic grievances rapidly politicized. Regime crackdowns, batons, arrests, tear gas, only fueled escalation. Slogans evolved overnight: death to Khamenei, down with the Islamic Republic, we want freedom. Women removed hijabs in defiance, workers threatened strikes in vital sectors. And chants invoked broader demands for rights and an end to theocracy. The Bazaris' participation was especially symbolic. Historically loyal to the regime, their defection signaled deep cracks in the system's base. Eroded by decades of favoritism toward IRGC-linked elites who hoarded subsidized currency while ordinary merchants faced market rates. The true turning point came on January 8, 2026. Exiled Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi released a powerful video call to action from abroad. Circulated via VPNs and diaspora networks despite growing internet restrictions. He urged Iranians to flood the streets at precisely 8 p.m. local time on January 8 and 9, reject regime violence, chant in unison, and demand freedom, not reform, but revolution. This is the final battle, he declared, promising to return and calling on security forces to side with the people. The response was immediate and massive. Crowds swelled dramatically in Tehran and provincial capitals, with estimates of 1.5 million in Tehran alone on January 8 and up to 5 million nationwide the next day. Chants shifted to "Pahlavi will return," "Long live the Shah," "Make Iran great again," and "Death to the dictator." Blending nostalgia for pre-1979 secular prosperity with outright calls for regime change. Panic gripped the authorities. Hours after Pahlavi's broadcast, the nationwide internet blackout slammed down at around 20:30 Iran Standard Time on January 8, severing communication and coordination. What had begun as bizarre anger over bread prices had coalesced into a unified, revolutionary demand: the end of the Islamic Republic itself. For the first time since 1979, a broad coalition, merchants, students, women, workers, even some disillusioned security elements, openly rejected the theocracy, invoking Pahlavi as a symbol of a freer past and hopeful future. The peak of the violence erupted over the nights of January 8 to 9, 2026. Turning swelling protests into the deadliest episode in the Islamic Republic's history. After Reza Pahlavi's video call urging synchronized mass demonstrations at 8 p.m. on both days, streets filled with hundreds of thousands in Tehran and millions nationwide. In Rasht, the historic bazaar became a battleground amid reported fires. Similar scenes unfolded in Kermanshah, Isfahan, Shiraz, and Tabriz. Crowds chanted "Death to the dictator," "Pahlavi will return," and "Long live the Shah." Some of the largest gatherings since 2009. The regime reacted with extreme force. Regular police withdrew, replaced by elite IRGC ground forces and basage units. From around 9 p.m. on January 8, rooftop snipers fired precise head and chest shots, vehicle-mounted machine guns swept crowds, and commando teams used automatic rifles at close range. Indiscriminate fire hit bystanders, children, and fleeing protesters, leaving many dead before reaching hospitals. At 20:30 Iran Standard Time on January 8, as crowds peaked, authorities activated a nationwide internet kill switch. NetBlocks recorded near-total loss of mobile data, broadband, and SMS for 92 million people. The blackout, lasting over 2 weeks, prevented coordination, blocked graphic footage from escaping, and isolated families. By January 9, protesters stormed basage bases and torched regime symbols, but faced overwhelming firepower. Leaked records show targeted brutality, close-range shots to vital areas and facial buckshot to blind. Opposition sources estimate at least 12,000 deaths during these 48 hours. The regime's message was clear: unified defiance would be met with annihilation under digital darkness. Smuggled testimonies slowly pierced the blackout, revealing cities turned into killing fields to preserve theocratic rule. One of the most chilling and deliberate tactics in Iran's January 2026 crackdown was the systematic targeting of protesters' eyes. Turning non-lethal crowd control tools into instruments of permanent mutilation and terror. Security forces, primarily IRGC and Bazaar, fired pellet guns, birdshot-loaded shotguns, and rubber-coated projectiles at close range directly into faces, blinding hundreds or thousands forever. The intent was clear: allow survival to spread fear, but rob victims of the ability to see, read, work, or continue activism in a free future. Smuggled medical reports, detailed in the Sunday Times on January 18, 2026, from a network of doctors using Starlink amid the blackout, revealed horrific numbers. Between 700 and 1,000 people lost one or both eyes, with many more facing irreversible vision loss from embedded pellets and shattered sockets. Tehran's Noor Clinic alone documented around 7,000 pellet-related eye injuries following the January 8 to 9 violence. Overwhelming staff who performed hundreds of emergency enucleations, eye removals, in a single night to prevent infections. Witnesses described scenes of chaos, patients arriving with faces riddled with shot, bleeding profusely, and doctors racing against time in under-equipped facilities. This echoed but vastly exceeded the infamous blinding by pellet tactic from the 2022 Masa Amini protests. Human rights groups like Amnesty International and HRANA classified these acts as potential crimes against humanity, inflicting unnecessary, cruel suffering on civilians in violation of international law. The strategy served multiple purposes: maiming reduced immediate death counts, tempering global outrage, created enduring symbols of repression through blind survivors, and crippled a young generation mostly under 30. Survivors recounted the terror of pellets whistling through the air or the sudden, blinding impact plunging them into darkness. Many avoided hospitals fearing arrest, leading to untreated infections and worsened outcomes. In a regime long accused of calculated cruelty, this targeted blinding stood out as one of the 2026 crackdown's cruelest innovations, not just to crush dissent, but to steal vision from an entire generation dreaming of a free Iran. The crackdown in January 2026 extended far beyond the streets, infiltrating hospitals and turning sanctuaries of healing into instruments of state terror. Security forces deliberately obstructed life-saving care, ensuring many who survived initial shootings would not survive afterward. Leaked medical records from the Doctors Network, published by the Sunday Times on January 18, 2026, documented repeated instances of Bazaar and IRGC members blocking blood transfusions for critically wounded patients. Arriving in hemorrhagic shock from gunshot or pellet wounds, many were denied access to blood banks. Staff reported families begging to donate while armed guards at hospital doors refused entry. Some patients bled out in corridors, preventable deaths witnessed helplessly by medical personnel. Hospitals themselves became danger zones. Fearing immediate arrest, thousands of injured avoided treatment entirely, leading to untreated infections, gangrene, and amputations. Those who reached facilities often faced worse. Accounts describe forces storming operating theaters, dragging bleeding patients off surgical tables mid-procedure, handcuffing them despite open wounds, and disappearing them into detention without postoperative care. The dead received no dignity. Bodies were swiftly removed from streets in unmarked vans before families could identify them, taken to distant morgues or buried in mass graves to prevent funerals from sparking further unrest. Some families paid exorbitant ransom sums, equivalent to years of wages, for the return of remains. Refusal meant permanent disappearance. Doctors and nurses risked arrest, beatings, or execution to treat secretly and record casualties. The prolonged internet blackout compounded the crisis, preventing families from locating loved ones, organizing blood drives, or seeking help. Digital rights monitors described this as medical repression under darkness, designed to maximize suffering while evading accountability. The result was a layered humanitarian catastrophe. Thousands who could have survived with timely intervention died from treatable wounds, shock, or sepsis. As one surviving medic told Iran International, they didn't just shoot to kill, they made sure no one could heal, remember, or fight again. In this way, Iran's hospitals were conscripted into silent partnership with the regime's terror apparatus. The human cost of Iran's 2026 crackdown is heartbreakingly young. Across credible sources, from the Sunday Times leaked doctors' report to Tehran, Amnesty International, and even the regime's partial admissions, the overwhelming majority of victims killed and maimed are under 30. This is no accident. It reveals both the demographic driving the protests and the regime's calculated intent to crush its most dynamic, future-oriented opposition at the source. The Sunday Times report, based on nationwide hospital records, states that most of the dead and injured are believed to be under 30. With large numbers in their late teens and early 20s, university students, apprentices, young workers. Tehran's verified data as of mid-January shows over 70% of its 3,308 to 4,029 documented protester deaths falling in the 18 to 29 age group. Eyewitnesses and leaked logs describe teenagers shot mid-chant, children as young as 12 caught in crossfire, and even pregnant women hit by live rounds or pellets, resulting in miscarriages or maternal deaths. These young victims embody a generation born after 1979, untouched by the revolution's early promises, raised amid repression, economic collapse, and glimpses of freer societies via VPNs and satellite media. Their demands go beyond reform, secular democracy, full women's rights, and frequent nostalgic calls for Reza Pahlavi and pre-1979 monarchy. We want our king, make Iran great again. By disproportionately targeting youth, the regime seeks to eliminate the next wave of dissent. Blind or disabled survivors become living deterrents. Join the fight, and your life, as student, worker, future parent, ends before it begins. Yet this cruelty has backfired, fueling global solidarity marches where diaspora youth carry portraits of the fallen. These are not mere numbers, they represent a stolen generation, brimming with dreams, now reduced to graves, hospital beds, and lifelong scars. The regime may hold the streets for now, but it cannot erase the memory of what it has done to its own children. That memory, carried by survivors and exiles, may prove the theocracy's most enduring enemy. The information war surrounding Iran's 2026 crackdown has been as fierce as the violence itself, with wildly divergent death toll estimates reflecting the regime's deliberate opacity and the opposition's efforts to pierce the blackout. The most explosive figure comes from the clandestine report leaked by Iranian doctors to the Sunday Times on January 18, 2026. Compiled using smuggled Starlink terminals during the near-total internet shutdown, it estimates at least 1,600 protesters killed, potentially up to 18,000, plus 330,000 to 360,000 injured. These numbers, drawn from overwhelmed hospitals nationwide, focus especially on the January 8 to 9 massacre and include detailed breakdowns of military-grade wounds. Iran, the U.S. based human rights activists news agency, provides the most rigorously verified lower-end count, 308 to 4,029 protester deaths confirmed by mid-January, alongside over 24,000 arrests and thousands more cases under review. Many deaths remain unreported due to fear of reprisal. A senior Iranian official, quoted by Reuters on January 18, admitted over 5,000 total fatalities, including roughly 500 security personnel, while blaming armed terrorists backed by the U.S. and Israel. Supreme Leader Khamenei, in his rare January 17 televised address, conceded several thousands dead but framed them as misguided, emotional youths manipulated by foreign enemies, explicitly naming President Donald Trump as a criminal inciting unrest. Opposition outlets like Iran International, CBS, and exiled networks push higher ranges, 12,000 to 20,000 protester deaths, closely aligning with the Sunday Times data. Wikipedia aggregations reflect this spectrum, from Hrana's 4,029 to 13,078 to activist claims nearing 20,000. The 13-day, and counting, nationwide blackout, activated at 20:30 Iran Standard Time on January 8, created the perfect fog. NetBlocks recorded connectivity dropping to 2%, blocking live evidence, family searches, and medical coordination while allowing state media to dominate the domestic narrative with images of security casualties and burned buildings. Rights groups labeled it a tool to conceal crimes against humanity. As smuggled testimonies and doctor leaks gradually escape, the higher estimates gain credibility, underscoring an information battle where truth itself is a casualty. The protests that began as economic grievances in late December 2025 had, by mid-January 2026, evolved into an existential challenge to the Islamic Republic. What started with Bazaar shutdowns over hyperinflation and shortages quickly became a broad revolutionary movement demanding regime change. Chants shifted from "death to high prices" to "death to Khamenei," "down with the Islamic Republic," and explicit calls for secular democracy, women's rights, and the return of Reza Pahlavi. On January 17, Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei broke weeks of near silence with a rare televised address, his first direct acknowledgement of mass casualties. He conceded several thousands dead, a stunning admission from a regime that usually denies or minimizes its repression. Yet the speech was steeped in deflection. Victims were portrayed as emotional young people and teenagers committing mischief, manipulated by foreign enemies. Khamenei singled out U.S. President Donald Trump as a criminal whose public warnings and promises of support had incited the unrest. He accused protesters of being American and Israeli foot soldiers, framing the uprising as an externally orchestrated insurgency rather than genuine domestic discontent. State media amplified this narrative, broadcasting images of burned buildings, clashes, and over 100 reported security force deaths to justify lethal force, the internet blackout, and mass arrests. Hrana documented over 24,000. The Ministry of Intelligence claimed thousands of terrorist group arrests, while Tasnim and other outlets emphasized regime casualties to paint security personnel as victims defending the nation. Khamenei's partial candor, admitting thousands dead, unintentionally lent weight to higher opposition estimates, 12,000, 20,000 from Iran International and others, aligning with the Sunday Times 16,500 to 18,000. His blame shifting to Trump and foreign powers aimed to preserve regime legitimacy and rally hardliners, but it also highlighted deep vulnerability. A leader forced to speak after 3 weeks of escalating bloodshed could no longer fully deny the scale. Meanwhile, Trump's rhetoric intensified the crisis. He repeatedly warned of severe U.S. consequences if killings continued, imposed new tariffs, and claimed his pressure had already prevented planned mass executions. These statements energized opposition voices while raising fears of escalation. The IRGC, weakened by 2025 losses in clashes with Israel and the collapse of its regional axis of resistance, redirected its depleted forces inward, deploying elite units for domestic annihilation tactics. Some defections occurred, met with swift purges. In this crucible of repression and defiance, the regime clung to power through terror, narrative control, and isolation, but the memory of the stolen generation and the chance for freedom continued to echo, both inside Iran and across the diaspora.